The roaring of the rotor blades carved through pre-dawn haze as the rescue helicopter descended toward the smoke-choked backyard. The medical crew had spotted a broken sprinkler line flooding Mrs. Harper's property next door, and what began as a routine equipment drop had spiraled into an impromptu aerial intervention. But from the moment Karen Duncan spotted the chopper slicing through her perfect view, not the emergency that brought it, her blood ran cold with rage. She stepped onto the back deck, face flushed beneath oversized sunglasses, and raised her antique shotgun. She knew the HOA covenant prohibited unauthorized low-flying aircraft above lot boundaries. It was her rule, her literal tyranny. Her finger tensed on the trigger. The first blast shook the helicopter's hull, sending concrete pavers cracking in the driveway. Inside, paramedic Ruiz shielded her eyes as her partner pulled the aircraft upward, engines coughing. Panic seized the small crowd that had gathered on the street to watch the spectacle. Neighbors' phones raised, faces pale. Karen's eyes gleamed triumphantly as she reloaded. She believed she had struck a blow for neighborhood order. Little did she know her one-shot defiance would ignite a chain reaction far beyond the cul-de-sac. When the day broke fully, the story had gone viral. Cell phone footage exploded on social media. An entitled HOA president, more obsessed with property values than human lives, firing on a life-saving mission. News outlets descended. A federal aviation marshal arrived at her door with a warrant. The indignation was electric. Subscriptions surged, hashtags trended, and donations to the Air Rescue Foundation skyrocketed. Lawsuits piled up. Criminal charges loomed. Karen's own allies recoiled as the scandal eclipsed every petty grievance she had ever championed. At the worst moment, her personal assistant stepped forward with a hidden truth. Dozens of HOA members had secretly complained about her heavy-handed tactics, but none dared speak until the nation's cameras shamed her. One by one, board members publicly resigned. Testimonies surfaced of fabricated rule violations. An unexpected witness emerged, a local teenager named Lily, whose life had earlier been saved by the same rescue crew when her asthma attack nearly claimed her. She stepped up at the courtroom hearing, wrists still trembling from her inhaler, eyes fierce behind her hospital wristband, to deliver the final blow. The revelation shattered Karen's carefully curated image. Soon the courtroom drama hit its crescendo. Karen, once accustomed to condescending lecterns, now sat shackled in the defendant's box. The federal prosecutor laid out her case. Reckless endangerment of an aircraft, attempted homicide, violation of federal aviation laws. She had believed her pipe dreams of absolute neighborhood sovereignty would shield her. Instead, the gavel fell like thunder. Guilty on all counts. Even her last-ditch motion, citing HOA bylaws, was laughed out of court. Senators seized the moment, drafting legislation to clarify emergency flight paths over private property. Headlines proclaimed, "When entitlement crosses the line, and HOA gone wild." Yet as Karen was escorted away in handcuffs, something remarkable happened in that same suburban enclave. Neighbors who once cowered under her rule reclaimed their lawns, planting wildflowers in memorial to the helicopter crew. They organized weekly potlucks to celebrate community over conformity and erected that very sign, "Justice Flies Higher," as a permanent reminder of what mattered: human life over property lines. Lily became an advocate, touring schools to teach emergency preparedness and the importance of community solidarity. The HOA reformed with new leadership elected by an overwhelming majority, passed bylaws preventing future abuses, and designated an annual rescue day, where the local fire and air teams hosted open houses. In the quiet aftermath, the echo of Karen's shotgun blast faded into legend. Some still whisper about the night law flew through the air in a whir of rotors and gunfire. Others recall the faces of brave medics forced to dodge shotgun pellets as they tried to save lives. But most remember the unity that sprouted from chaos, a testament to the power of collective action when one person's outrage overshadows one person's cruelty. The transformed neighborhood stands today as a living gallery of reclaimed agency and a warning to any future Karen that no amount of entitlement can outrank federal law or the will of a community united. So what do you think? Was the community right to turn their backs on Karen? Or did they go too far in celebrating her downfall? Share your thoughts. Justice served or entitlement exposed? The courtroom emptied in hushed reverence as the last of Karen Duncan's supporters slipped away, their heads bowed beneath the weight of shame. Yet beyond those walls, in the stretch of manicured lawns and freshly painted mailboxes, life pulsed with renewed vigor. The air smelled of cut grass and wildflowers, a stark contrast to the acrid smoke and gunpowder that had drawn national attention only days before. Without pause, the community set about rebuilding not just fences and flower beds, but the very trust that Karen had shattered. On a sun-drenched Saturday morning, neighbors gathered in the cul-de-sac circle, carrying folding chairs and picnic blankets. They had never used that shared green before. Karen's edicts had banned impromptu gatherings as security risks. Now, at the center of the circle stood Lily, the courageous teenager whose asthma attack had brought the rescue crew into view. She wore a t-shirt emblazoned with the helicopter silhouette from that fateful night, and the slogan "Life over lines." Her voice, steady and warm, carried across the crowd as she recounted how a single act of violence had united them in defiance of fear. Her speech concluded with a call to plant trees in honor of the rescue workers, and as shovels hit soil, the community felt their wounds begin to heal. Meanwhile, federal agents continued their investigation into the extent of Karen's machinations. They unearthed decades of manipulated HOA records, falsified meeting minutes, forged signatures on at least 30 violation notices, and financial statements that funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars into a private slush fund. The evidence painted a portrait of greed masked by civic pride. Karen orchestrating fines for trivial infractions, imposing soaring dues for security upgrades, then pocketing the money. Prosecutors suggested she had lined her pockets far beyond what the township had ever seen. But the heart of the case cried out not just for restitution but for prevention of such abuse ever again. In a crisp press conference held on the steps of the county courthouse, the U.S. Attorney announced sweeping reforms. HOA covenants across the state would now require transparent audits, member votes on budget allocations, and a federal hotline for reporting suspected misuse of authority. "We cannot allow private associations to become private dictatorships," she declared, her tone resolute. Reporters scribbled notes as cameras flashed, capturing faces both triumphant and contrite. The governor, standing beside her, vowed to sign the legislation into law within days. Back on Elmwood Drive, the new HOA board convened its first meeting in the revitalized community center, a former storage shed they repurposed with donated lumber and volunteer labor. They welcomed a diverse roster of residents: young families, retirees, service workers, and even a former flight nurse. No longer would a single individual wield unchecked power. Instead, every decision from landscaping guidelines to neighborhood watch schedules would be driven by consensus. When the agenda called for a vote on installing solar-powered streetlights, the discussion raged with friendly fervor. Suggestions ranged from cost-sharing models to grants from the county's sustainability fund. By night's end, they had a plan everyone could live with. But amid the fervent optimism, old wounds still throbbed. Karen's former lieutenants, once emboldened to bark out orders and swap gossip watch from darkened windows. A handful refused to attend community events, their resentment simmering. Word spread that they hoped Karen might flee the country or leverage her wealth for an appeal. Yet prosecutors had secured her confiscated assets to pay restitution and legal fees. Her appeals faltered as the evidence proved irrefutable. Even her most fanatical defenders whispered doubts as they saw their own bank accounts shrink and their names scrubbed from HOA leadership rosters. Lily's story became more than local legend. She was invited to speak at schools and civic clubs, championing emergency response awareness and community solidarity. She recalled how paramedic Ruiz had soothed her with a gentle voice while the rotors whirled overhead, then vowed to dedicate her life to helping others. The rescue crew stationed a commemorative plaque in her honor at the county airport. "To Lily, whose courage reminded us why we fly." When she returned home that evening, neighbors greeted her with homemade cupcakes and hugs, a chorus of gratitude echoing through the street. As autumn approached, the first of the memorial trees reached 6 feet tall. Golden leaves fell like confetti on the sign proclaiming "Justice flies higher." The site inspired neighboring subdivisions to erect their own signs and hold similar ceremonies. Media outlets ran human interest segments, lauding Elmwood Drive as a model of resilience and reform. National headlines read, "From shotgun blast to solidarity, how one HOA's fall sparked a movement." Yet, somewhere beyond the shuttered gates of Karen's once dominant estate, she paced her grand foyer in handcuffs, schizophrenia and delusion her only companions. Defense attorneys petitioned for psychiatric evaluation, claiming she had been under extreme HOA stress. The judge rejected the plea, citing her deliberate actions and clear intent. No claims of mental instability could excuse the bolt aimed at an innocent helicopter. The jury's verdict stood guilty in federal court, no leniency. In the final chapter of this drama, schoolchildren staged a play reenacting the rescue, complete with papier-mâché helicopter and handmade rifles painted harmlessly gray. Parents cheered as the protagonists overcame fear with unity, the narrative culminating in a tableau of neighbors hand in hand before the sign. Tickets sold out in minutes, proceeds funding scholarships for aspiring EMTs and firefighters. On the eve of Karen's sentencing, the neighborhood gathered one last time under strings of festive lights. They toasted to new beginnings, laughter ringing across yards once hushed by intimidation. Residents shared stories of small victories, repairing broken fences, starting community gardens, organizing holiday block parties. No longer bound by fear, they embraced the power of collective will. And as the clock struck 9, they raised their glasses toward the sky, saluting the silent silhouettes of rescue choppers patrolling distant horizons. For they knew that while property lines could divide, courage and compassion would always unite. Was this justice served? Or did the community's celebration cross into vengeance? Will the reforms truly safeguard future neighborhoods, or could another Karen lurk behind polished doors? Share your perspective. Stand up for order or stand up for life?